Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Unlocked Show. I'm your host, Tracy Wilson, and it's my pleasure to introduce you today to the amazing Ruthie Bowles. So I've asked Ruthie to come on the show today because she is the one and only specialist when it comes to infusing your brand with radical authenticity. So we're going to hear all about that. We're going to hear about her story, how she came to be this known as the Radically Authentic Brand Strategist. What exactly does that mean, and how can it impact you and your business? So I want to welcome her to today's show. And as per normal, guys, if you're watching for the very first time, we are live right now on Facebook, YouTube, across multiple channels. What does that mean? That means that given we are live, it means that you can actually talk with us. So in the comment section below, you guys can actually ask myself or Ruthie any questions that you might have in relation to creating a brand that has radical authenticity. So participate in today's conversation, ask as many questions as you want. You know, having experts like Ruthie on the show like this gives you guys a opportunity to be able to connect directly with the speaker. So please make sure that you do that. And if you're just here just to hang out, just say hi. Say, hey, Trace, hey, Ruthie. And we'll say hi back, and you just never know, your name might end up on the show too. So welcome to the show, Ruthie. Awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Ruthie was just telling me, I want to say, as soon as she jumped on the show, she was like we're talking about radically, being radically authentic, and being a mum of, I think she's got 4 children. She was saying, just got the kids to bed. Now I can kind of sit down and share my knowledge and my wisdom with your viewers. And before that, I had to go out and milk the goat. So, we might even hear a little bit about this goat and what the heck she was having to do. And, I live in the city, so me being able to have a goat would require me to have it on my balcony, which is probably not quite going to happen. But anyhow, outside, I just thought it was quite interesting. She was like, yeah, just got the kids to bed and I've just had to milk the goat, and now I'm here. So now that you are here, Ruthie, let's kind of do a bit of a backpedal. And given your background and your experience kind of in that government world and working as a translator and government intelligence analyst, like how does one go from something like that into then becoming a person who works with, business owners to infuse their brand with radical authenticity? How the heck did that happen?
So what I would say is that actually the creative, artistic, intuitive side of me was a bit more natural. And then what ended up happening, as I joined the Army right at 18, so right out of high school, going into the Army, and had just years and years and years of training in all sorts of different types of analysis. And when I was ready to, transition out of that life, I was pregnant with my 4th child. And by that time I had gone from being in the Army to being a federal contractor, and it just wasn't the same for me. And so what I decided to do, I said, hey, let's look at writing for people. And, that's how I got started, is I was leaning largely on my creative skills, but then I was working with clients who would ask me questions about strategy and marketing. And I'm like, I've been learning about that. If you want, I could take a look at it. And I discovered as that happened, as I went from just writing content for my clients and also helping them with the strategy and how to use it, things that were just starting to come very naturally to me and not to them, I realized that analysis is analysis, essentially. And there were actually a lot of points of commonality between the types of intelligence analysis I used to do, and then also the translation that I did, and what I needed to do for my clients in order for them to be successful.
So just thinking about that then, like when given your vast career in that whole analysis space and intelligence, and kind of then molding that into, now I recognize that there's some commonalities here. What were some of the things that you actually saw that kind of were like the light bulb moments of, hold on a minute, what I've been doing for many, many years in the Army and in the government space, in my corporate role and career, there are things there that I've learned that actually do flow over into the entrepreneurial space. How do they apply? Like, what are the commonalities there?
So, in terms of kind of how we operate on in the intelligence community, one of the big things is that every single operation is justified by a national intelligence requirement. So that means that based on whatever the priorities were, whatever the requirements were determined at a very high level, every single mission that's running, every single project is then attached to one of those national intelligence requirements. And that ties over because one of the things I saw a lot of when I was first coming in, especially coming in from the content side of things, were people doing content or almost any marketing for the sake of doing content. They would check the box on that content. But, then someone like me comes in and, I'm not afraid to ask the question anymore. I'll say, okay, so why are you doing this? And they're like, well, we're supposed to be. Supposed to be for what?
Mm-hmm.
Supposed to be for what? Like, what is your overarching requirement? How are you measuring success for this beyond the fact that you scheduled it, beyond the fact that it got likes or shares or even comments? How are you measuring success for this? And what is the bigger business requirement for this content? How is this marketing supporting your overarching business goals? And a lot of businesses, from very small to very large, completely missed the boat on that. They were like, we put out content. Done. And that's just not it.
And that's a really interesting thing that you should bring up, because that is one of those things that a lot of people do miss the mark on, right? Like you talked about analysis, and the whole that saying of analysis paralysis. We get stuck in that analyzing, and when you're doing that, it's like, well, why am I doing it? What's the bigger picture here? What's the purpose? What's the outcome that I'm looking for in terms of analyzing a particular thing? So often, as you alluded to, small business, big business, corporates even, we get almost programmed to think, well, the way to success is just by creating content.
Mm-hmm.
But you ask a really good question, and that question is, but why? But why are you doing that? And so when you can ask that question, and sometimes you may even need to go, layers and layers deep, in terms of, well, why are you doing that? Well, because that's what everybody does, and that's what we've been told to do. But why? And then going the next level and the next level and the next level, to the point where you're like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, is there actually an intention, a purpose with it, a desire, an actual measurable desired outcome for the task and the activity that you're doing? Otherwise, you can tend to get stuck in let's call it the world of busyness rather than intentional productivity.
Absolutely. And you bring up an interesting point about the analysis paralysis. Having been trained as an analyst, we, based on the types of missions and things, that we have, we can't afford to be, oh, I just need to learn a bit more and just need to do this. We have to learn when we've learned enough to take an action that we can then use as feedback. So whatever the result is, we can use it as feedback to then course correct or, make an even better decision or refine whatever it is that we're trying to understand. And a lot of times that feedback will actually guide you onto the things that you didn't know. Right. So that's the other thing, is when you're trained as an analyst, typically you also know when you've done enough, researching and when, okay, now it's time to take some type of action so we can get actual primary feedback generated by us with the audience that we're looking to target. Any other research that you're doing that's not based on your numbers and your content, that's all secondary. That's from someone else and their audience. So you can learn lessons from that, certainly, but it's not going to be the perfect fit that you're looking for with your audience and your marketing.
Mm-hmm. I want to hold that thought, because I want to come back to that, because that's a really important piece. Because often, working on that basis of analysis paralysis, but for a lot of people, they don't know when have I gone far enough? So I just hold that thought, because I want to circle back to that in a few moments. But before we do that, I want to talk about this whole concept of radical authenticity. And let's kind of unpackage that so that we can help everybody understand what exactly is that and why is that so important. Like radical authenticity in the book of Ruthie, what does that mean?
Awesome. So first, what I want to say is that I considered just saying authenticity, but then nobody would know that what I was talking about was something different besides the kind of trite marketing and like entrepreneur sense of, oh, be authentic, be yourself. And that's what everyone says, but nobody tells you how to do that. Nobody tells you how to just show up as yourself. And when I say radical authenticity, I'm not talking about showing up as the person or the face that you present to everyone else, the person or the face or the mask that is like weighing you down day after day as you perform based on other people's expectations. It really is about anchoring into your authentic self and then focusing on authentically expressing that to your audience. And that's really the key difference. Is a lot of times people say be authentic, and they say that without any type of guidance whatsoever. And this is especially tough if someone actually hasn't done the work to determine who they are and how they want to show up. So, and I learned this, almost the hard way for myself in my own marketing. It presented, it was a few years ago. I used to go to events pre-COVID, right? I used to go to events and people would say, oh my goodness, you're so different than I thought you would be. I'd be like, what are you guys talking about? Really? I'm different? And they're like, totally. Based on your content, I thought you'd be way different. And it took a few people telling me that. And then I went back to look at my content. And then I realized that I was treating my content and speaking, in a very moderated tone, kind of the soft voice that I usually used when I wasn't trying to intimidate anybody when I was at work, instead of showing up as myself. And I gesticulate and I talk with my hands. I'm very expressive. So video works out really well for me, but I wasn't showing up in my marketing that way. And so that was like, one of my green lights later as I was working on developing this concept. But when you look at it in terms of radical authenticity and the impact it has on your business, radical authenticity is an inside out type of practice. And when you work on actually having your brand mirror the things that you hold to be true, the values that are just so critical, your why in terms of why you even have this business in the first place. When your brand reflects those things, it shows up in your marketing. It shows up in who you hire, who you would choose to hire, who would feel comfortable here. It shows up in your company culture, your sales, your partnerships, and your business operations. So it shows up everywhere because you've taken your brand and you've really infused it with something that's got some depth to it. And that's like a big problem lately is we've got a lot of brands that are very shallow, so they don't make people feel anything. And so that's really the goal. Is radical authenticity is showing up as yourself with the goal of creating real connection, because authenticity takes courage and vulnerability. And so when you show up that way, it forges a real connection with people. Audience, one to few, one to many, one to one. It makes a real connection.
And the good thing about that is that particularly if you're somebody who, you're working with clients, you're actually going to be attracting the right type of team members, partners, clients, members inside of your programs, inside of your community, who actually, let's use the word vibe, the same way that you do, because they understand exactly who you are. Like you say, talk with our hands, you're expressive, you use facial, a lot of facial expression, those sorts of things. And then finding that the right, I'm going to say medium to share your authentic you. And like you mentioned, you used to be a writer, you would blog it out, but translating that blog or that information that you had into a blog almost came out as a third person and writing for a third party. So therefore, when somebody met you, they're like, well, it's different. That's not who I thought you were. Whereas video, this is what I love about like this type of thing, because you cannot be anything but you, particularly when you are live. So it almost forces the authentic you to come out without you necessarily having to think too much about it, because it's just a la natural. So, but I want to ask this question. So let's say somebody, I'm a big advocate of this sort of forum because of that. But let's say somebody doesn't feel comfortable in maybe showing up in this space, or they've got a big brand that, that don't necessarily have, the opportunity to be able to show up authentically because they've got a big brand that they need to represent. how do they go through the process of understanding who the authentic who is it? Who's the authentic me? And then how do I translate that into my brand and into my marketing and into the activities and actions that I take? How does one do that?
Okay. So in terms of someone who's not comfortable, there's a concept I talk about. I call it the concentric circles of trust. And you have people that fall in those different circles, but the first person is always you in that first circle. So whatever it is you're going to share, it has to be something that you're comfortable with too. And we all have things in our lives that we avoid even thinking about because we just don't want to sit with it. It's too painful. That if you can't sit with it, that's not something you should put out there. And then you've got your second circle. Those will be just a few people who you can get really vulnerable with, share your dreams with. They're like the wind beneath your wings, and they're just always so supportive. Those are your people. After your first and second circles, you'll have however many number of circles it is that you need in terms of the dispersal of your content and your information and how authentic you want to get. But what I will say is that authenticity is something you use bit by bit. Before you get confident, you have to be courageous. And
Mm-hmm.
so even getting a little bit, if today you take one step outside of your comfort zone, you've just made your comfort zone bigger, which means tomorrow you can take another step. So it's not like you have to show up in an incredibly different way, although that's how I did it, but that's me. You don't have to do that. You can take one step every day, a few steps every day, and really make it happen for yourself. And in terms of the people who have the big brands or big brands that they're representing, that's a really good time to understand that there is and can be and should be a difference between your corporate brand and your personal brand, not just because a corporate brand shouldn't be whatever it is you want it to be. So that's not it. Because a corporate brand can be, it can have a lot of pizzazz, it can have a lot of sass, it can have whatever it is that you want it to have. But should you ever choose to exit that company, they're going to want the social media handles that go with it. So if you haven't taken the time to develop your personal brand or your personal channels are tied to the company, they're going to want those too. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
something, when you're doing that type of separation, you want to talk about it. And should the situation ever arise that you are sued, right? Like, of course, we don't want to feel like we're ever going to do anything where we've been sued, but you want to make sure, again, that even if you're an LLC, if you do not keep the channels separate, then when legal action like that comes upon you, the courts won't treat it as separate either because you blurred the lines first. So those are just a couple of things to keep in mind. But the big thing here is that a corporate brand and a personal brand, you can have them separately. And with the personal brand, it can actually become an asset to you because if you're an employee, let's say you're a high level employee at a company and you develop your personal brand and move to another company, in negotiations, the fact that you have this personal brand and authority and trust is actually leverage you can use as you're, negotiating your salary. You're saying, hey, I'm bringing some prestige by even showing up here, although you'd probably phrase it nicer, but that's true. And so it's something you can use to negotiate. So either way you look at it, it's always good to have your personal brand. And for smaller companies, at first, the lines are blurred, and that's just how it happens sometimes. But when it's bigger, it's always really good to separate them, not like a hard line or not super far apart separation, but just kind of have a clear distinction.
It's a really this is a great conversation to have, particularly for people, when we do have brands. Make no mistake that we have to get out there in some way, shape, or form. You have to be marketing your business in some way. So usually that requires an attractive character, as somebody, a spokesperson for that brand. And you bring up a really good point because there is technically, depending on how big your business, well, actually doesn't matter whether you've got a small business or you've got a very large business. There's actually two representations of brand that you need to make. One is for you, the individual, the brand of Tracy Wilson, the brand of Ruthie Bowles. What does that look like and how does that show up? And then there's the brand of the company. And, that I want to come back to that whole analysis and planning more so around with intention. What do they look like? And you've almost got to give in my opinion, give your business a identity and a soul and a personality. that's almost, it has some of you infused into it, but it's not totally you for the purposes that you just stated, that someday, if you are looking to hand that business on, sell that business, make it saleable, etc., you want it so that it actually has its own soul, its own identity, and somebody else can pick it up and they infuse their own personality into it. So anyway, that's my thank you.
No, absolutely. Tracy, you and I are vibing right now. We are I think it was last week or maybe the week before, I did a live stream for my Facebook group and I was saying your brand is your business's soul. That was literally the title of it. So we are here.
Yeah, well, it's so true. And so one of the things that I want to talk about here is that where it becomes a little difficult, because where I find it's really easy is when it's just you. It's the only person, you're the solopreneur. You can do this exercise of like, who's the brand of me? Who's Tracy Wilson? You show up, you can be authentic. That piece is, I'm going to say, relatively easy, because if you're just showing up and being you, it's relatively easy. Then when you're kind of looking at, okay, now I'm going to create a soul and a personality and almost turn this into a entity of its own. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What do I want people that have engage with it? What emotions do I want them to feel? What actions do I want them to take? What was it going to, look, feel, all of those kind of emotional things? What is that going to bring out in that brand? You can do that relatively simply too when it's just you, because there's only one mind. You've just got one mind to have to try and convince that's the it's almost like building a robot, right? Like I'm going to build. I mean, I'm thinking like the Jetsons, and I can't even remember the woman's name that was the robot on that. But you're creating that. Easy to do that when it's one mind. What if you've got 5 people in your business that all have their own individual personalities, and it's a board of directors that now is going to create the soul and the feel and the emotional pull with this new entity that you've created? How do you go about doing that? What's the process?
So for that, it's important to still remember, despite having a board or multiple contributors, you have to identify who your visionary leaders are in your company, because those will be the people who contribute to the development or further development, as the case is, of the brand's soul, of the business's soul. So even if you have a board of directors that's got 5 people, it may only be you and one other person that you've deemed as like the visionary leaders. And so those will be the people who contribute to the, establishing things like the mission and the purpose and the values. And when I say those things, they've kind of become a bit, again, kind of trite and canned. You see them on every template, this way all the way to Australia. But when you take them like what they're really meant for, like when we think about the question of why does your company exist, that should be a serious question, even if you're sitting there by yourself. Why do you keep showing up every day? And it has to run deep. And people often give answers when I ask people, okay, why do you do this? What's your business? Right from solopreneur all the way up. Why is this your business? And I often get a regurgitated version of their elevator pitch. And I'm like, that's not why you just told me you got up at 4:30 in the morning. That's not why you get up at 4:30. That doesn't sound right. And so it ties back actually to the emotional piece that you were talking about, because emotional intelligence is one of my specialties as well. And that's because marketing is meant to create emotion, which causes action then. So marketing doesn't create action. Marketing creates emotion that leads to action. And so if you can't tap those emotions in yourself, in your board, in your employees, your ability to tap those emotions and cause them to, really unleash in your audience it's not there. And so with those people, it always starts, identify your visionary leaders, and then you can walk them through the process. And you kind of walk them through the process of, okay, this is where we're at, but also where do we want to be? And so, I try to make it as easy as it is as possible to slip into like your imagination in a way. And when we look at the why, one of the ways that I look at it is if you were on your deathbed and you reflected on your life, what would you have wanted to accomplish? What would you want your legacy to look like? What would you want to outlive you, your impact, your business? What would you want that to look like? And when we look at it that way, it gets a lot more serious for people, and it goes way beyond, oh, I wanted to save people time and money. It's like, okay, but why? But why? Why does that matter? And so we dive in that way, but identifying the visionary leaders and then taking those questions very seriously. No, this is not an exercise meant to take up your time. It's not. But you got to take those questions very seriously. So you only want to have the visionary leaders and people who are going to take it seriously going through the exercise to build out the brand.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So with this process of kind of uncovering that radical authenticity for a brand, because I think we're all really, I'm hoping that everybody's hearing today that really, really important that regardless of whether you're working for somebody else, whether you're creating your own business, you want to create the brand of you. Like, we'll just park that over there and say, you absolutely want to be doing that, because that is going to, like Ruthie mentioned this right at the beginning, that's going to hold you and going to be something that you can leverage further down the track. So that just goes without saying. So let's continue to tackle this, the concept and the idea of creating radical authenticity for a brand and a business and a movement and a legacy that you are wanting to create. Because now we've kind of got that deeper level of, okay, so it's not just about creating some fancy, mission statement or an elevator pitch or anything like that. It's like, let's get really granular and really quite deep with why the heck are you doing this? Because if you can't get really deep with why the heck are you doing it? Why are you getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning? Why are you moving your schedule around? Why are you missing out on, things in your life to show up and be whatever it is that you're doing? Why are you doing that? And what's the legacy? How do we start to unfold and unpackage that? And what are some of the best ways that people can actually do that? And how can we translate that into really radically authentic content?
Okay, so the first place I always start with my clients is their emotional intelligence. So, with a really good assessment, one of the things that pops up is there are certain areas in everyone's emotional intelligence, their skill set of understanding emotions, their own emotions and other people's emotions. There are things that get in the way. And so I call those authenticity blockers. And for everybody, it can be there's so many different combinations of things that can get in the way of your authenticity. But in my work, I've noticed that entrepreneurs tend to almost consistently have a lower self-appreciation. And that, that's the confidence piece, like their self-confidence, their appreciation for their own accomplishments, a good understanding of their strengths and weaknesses. Entrepreneurs tend to have a lower self-appreciation. And that might just be because we're very giving. We want to give and we want to serve. And so we don't necessarily, we tie what we do to our self-worth. And it's like, well, when you do that, can you ever do enough? And the answer is no, which is why you shouldn't do that. But, identifying it and understanding it is very key because your emotional intelligence covers two areas, intrapersonal and interpersonal. When we talk about EQ or EIQ, depending on the acronym you're familiar with, a lot of people think of the social awareness and social management side of things, the interpersonal side of things. But the intrapersonal skills are actually foundational, and you will hit a wall in terms of actually improving your ability to work with other people if you don't first work on yourself. As this is what I was talking about radical authenticity being an inside out type of thing. If your self-appreciation, is a bit lower than you'd like it to be, that will definitely impact how confident or even how courageous, if you've never done it before, right? Because courage comes before confidence, but it will impact how courageous or confident you can be in your content, how willing you are to just be like, you know what? I'm going to test this idea. I think it's good. Let me test it and get feedback. If you don't have a high level of self-confidence, you're not going to be able to do that, which means you're never going to be able to get that feedback. And, without that self-appreciation, you're going to struggle to be vulnerable because you're not going to be able to really believe that anybody's going to want to hear what you have to say. And so that self-appreciation is just plaguing entrepreneurs these days. And there are other areas, of course, so looking at self-management, like how good is your self-control and discipline, starting and stopping projects all the time. Entrepreneurs, we get shiny object syndrome, and lots of FOMO. So we'll drop something and go and start something else. Well, if you cannot stick with something and consistently nurture an audience, you're never going to have a big audience because you don't take care of the little audience. So these are all of these things that can kind of get in the way. And those are just a couple examples because there's a lot of different blockers that are possible. And those are just kind of looking at more of the inside, the internal pieces. But when you look at, external types of emotional intelligence, the interpersonal, one of the big ones is communication. So people often they'll either have trouble receiving messages from people in the way that the receiver intended them to receive it. And so that can be a sign that, hey, maybe you need to work on empathy, because if you have a high level of empathy, it makes it easier to receive messages as they're intended. But also some people struggle to send, some people struggle to articulate what their message is. And if they struggle to articulate it, then that drastically decreases the likelihood that the audience will actually receive it the way that they intended. And so there's just a variety of things that can pop up, but the understanding emotional intelligence and how it relates to your authenticity is a really big and important first step that I take. But when you are able to kind of get those blockers out of the way, or at least improve in those areas, you'll find that, hey, maybe I couldn't be vulnerable with my friend about this topic, but you know what? I can recognize that vulnerability. I can recognize the fear. I manage it. I assess the risk, and I'm going to go ahead and talk to my friend about this topic. And when you can do it with your friends, then you start, again, you widen that comfort zone. You're like, you know what? I'm going to take a risk today, and I'm going to go live and talk to my audience about this topic. I wouldn't normally do it, but let's assess the risk. And so it becomes, okay, you can manage your emotions. You can properly assess risk and fear. We feel fear over things that are not going to kill us, but fear as an emotion was developed over things that were going to kill us. So if a car is not barreling down on you in a crosswalk, should you actually be afraid of hitting the publish button? And so that's a risk that you need to consciously assess instead of, kind of feeling that emotion in an unconscious way and then not even really giving it, the light of day and really assessing it. And so I feel like that's how it really translates over into the content. Once you get those authenticity blockers out of the way, your vulnerability, you become comfortable getting vulnerable with your audience. And the vulnerability is the basis for trust. Your vulnerability is almost like a currency that you can exchange with your audience. And I want to make the distinction of being vulnerable versus using vulnerability. You've probably seen that, and it doesn't look good. It's not a good look. But when you can show up and give of yourself, sharing, problems that you've had in the past and the lessons that you've learned, and you can get vulnerable about, failures and mistakes that you've made, and even being able to tie that to your business, life lesson, business lesson, then people see you as a human being. Right? They see you as a human being. And then if you work in a client-based business, a lot of times, like all of us, we just want to be seen. We want to feel like we're heard. We want to feel like we're understood. And if I feel like I know you, and then I know what you do, and then I trust you to tell me, hey, you know what, Ruthie, I actually do think that I know I can help you, Ruthie. Then I'm going to believe you when you say that, because you're going to be able to be convicted. And what I'm going to buy is not your skills. I'm not buying all your certifications and all your tools in your toolkit. What I'm buying is your conviction that you can help me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love that, Ruthie. I want to ask this question because, social media has been over the last, almost decade now of like people being on social media, Instagram, TikTok, all of those sorts of things, where we're seeing a lot of almost, I'm going to say, manufactured content that's out there. And so, and I think we're almost turning a corner now, like this conversation of authenticity and realism and bringing all of you to the table and all of that sort of stuff is very much the conversation of now. How much do you think there, like in the marketplace with, when I talk to your analysis side, how much of what you analysed and researched is important nowadays from a authenticity rather than something that looks fantastic, something that's like from a brand, particularly from a brand point of view. Do you know what I'm talking about? So like you've got the brand that's authentic, shows up. You might not have all of the bells and whistles or the shiny, and glitz and glitter. And then there's the brand that looks fantastic. In your opinion nowadays, what are audiences screaming out for?
So what I would say is that if you look, even 3 years ago, 5 years ago, what was effective then isn't as effective now. In a lot of cases, especially if you're in the business space, say you're a coach or a consultant who works with entrepreneurs, for example, something like that, that's a way more sophisticated audience than it used to be, right? So I can see your Instagram feed and think, oh, that looks nice. And I can do that myself too, because now they make apps that they're like, put in your brand colors and here are like 50 templates. So I know that, you can use an app for that. I know that you can outsource your work overseas for a much lower fee than you would, here in the United States. For me, I know that you can do all of those things. And so I'm not necessarily overly impressed by that. In fact, the more savvy the audience, the more of a keen eye that they will use to assess your content. So what I'm wondering is this content reflective of the brand, or is it really nice wrapping paper for a not so nice present? And so I think a lot more entrepreneurs are feeling that way. And so it really depends on the sophistication of your audience. So if you're in a space where they're not savvy to the types of strategies and techniques and approaches that people and businesses will use, then they may not realize it at first. They'll be distracted. They'll be content with the different bells and whistles, right? As you said. But if you're working with a savvy audience, like that is your target market, then these, oh, we just connected on LinkedIn and oh my goodness, on a Saturday at 6:30 in the morning, because I didn't fix my automation, I'm saying good day and thank you for connecting. Nobody likes that. And so that's why people get ignored and people are savvy to it. Now you're pretending that you're here and I know that you're not, because you just sent me a book in your first LinkedIn message. So I think it just really boils down to the savviness of the audience. But honestly, if the audience is savvy or not, I think what we're crying out for is to be treated like people and not like numbers. And so this is like I've been talking about. Okay, are you focusing on lead generation or are you focusing on relationship generation? Because then it becomes very easy. Lead generation, they're like, it's a numbers game. But if you're looking at relationship generation, then that is quality over quantity every time.
Mm-hmm. And I love that. And I think, that's the shift that is because the market has become a lot more savvy and people are crying. We've been through that phase of, we're a number in a program, we're a number at within a business. What people are crying out for is to be seen. And you mentioned this earlier, just want to be seen. I want to be known. I've had examples where, like, I even think now I've lived in this apartment building for, nearly 5 years now. I have an expectation that the building managers downstairs are at least going to say, hey, Trace, how you going? Like, I've been here 5 years. Surely you would know my name. That's all you need to know, just so you can say, hey, Tracy, so I know I've been seen, you know me. It's like it changes the relationship considerably. That's just a very, very basic example. But even likewise in, various different programs that you pay a lot of money for. I can think of examples where I've literally had a conversation, or I thought I had a conversation with the head coach of a particular program via Messenger, get on a plane, go all the way over to America, get to a conference, bump into that person in the corridor and say, hey, so what time is lunch? And they say, oh, so who are you? Are you in my program? And I'm like, what the heck? Like literally 2 days ago, we were chatting on Messenger. So this is kind of the stuff that's, I know it's like gasp, right? Because this is the stuff that I think is really, really important. The time has, people are craving you, and nowadays I expect that. So the savviness that you speak of, but also that level of authenticity and intimacy is something that is also expected now. So as the audience becomes more sophisticated, so does the level of expectation with that
Absolutely.
level of sophistication. So
And
really
let me ask you, if you knew that you were talking to, let's say, a coach on that person's team, right? So you knew, like, hey, this is the person I'm talking to, person on the team, not the actual head coach. Would you have been upset?
Totally not. I would have said, hey, that's cool. I'm talking with Ruthie. I would have said to the
Right.
person when I was there, hey, I had a great chat with Ruthie on Messenger. So what time is the lunch? I mean, the conversation would have been different, right? So it is about,
Absolutely.
it doesn't matter if it's not you. You're better off. I think the point we're making here is that you're better off just to be authentic, be upfront and honest and say, it's one of my team or I'm on Tracy's team, rather than making out that it's Tracy who's speaking to you when it's clearly not, because you'll come unstuck somewhere down the line, and that's where
Absolutely.
radical authenticity is, comes into play, and it's so darn important.
Yes. And since you brought that up, what I'll say is something I've noticed, especially in this space, right? Because I had a pretty rough experience with a high-end program myself. And so I live stream a lot. So I did a live stream a couple weeks ago and I called it brand business dissonance. And so it's a phenomenon that I've been looking at and I'm like, okay, this is what it is. You've developed a brand that people can fall in love with. Like you've developed a brand where people see themselves in it and they are getting like powered up on the energy, but you hold your brand to just the marketing and divorce it from the sales, from the hiring, from client, like the client engagement, the operations, your partnerships. You hold your brand separate only to marketing and exclude it from everything else. Because if this brand that everyone fell in love with was allowed to infuse everything within the business, that experience would have been completely different. On a brand, we say we value honesty, but then they're being dishonest with misrepresenting who you're actually speaking to in Messenger. Is somebody who allows their brand to infuse their entire operation, that just wouldn't happen. It would be like, no, what I need to do actually is make sure that people know about my assistant, about my teammates, just as much as they know about me. I need to be constantly hyping them up so they look forward to talking to them, because we are going to be honest here, because that is a brand value. And so that brand business dissonance is something I'm seeing a lot, because people are sacrificing their values in favor of so-called scalability and compromising the client experience.
Speaking my language, girlfriend, just got to say that. So it's like, this is the stuff that I get really passionate about, because it's this, and the reason I get passionate about it is because I've been there, I've been through really high-end programs that you then go, like you said, to go meet the person and you're like, huh? Oh, she's not really that friendly. Like she is all friendly online, and she can't hold a conversation with me. That's really strange. Why is that? So all of these sorts of things. So I love that we're actually bringing to the forefront and what's great about this is that it actually becomes really easy for people. And when I say it almost becomes the easiest thing you can do, because it's so freaking authentic. When it's you and you infuse that into everything that you do, and that on your value list: family, integrity, honesty, alignment, doing what you say you're going to do, showing up on time, all of these sorts of things. When you know that that's really important, and you can infuse that into every single part of your business, you don't even really have to think too hard about it.
Absolutely. The decisions, I won't say that, acting on your decisions is easy, but making those decisions is clear, because you've laid the foundation. So like, for example, they're just this weekend, I had somebody ask me, I do a why workshop. Next one will be in June. So I do them about once a month now. It's a why workshop. And somebody asked me if I consider creating kind of like a drip video course for it. And, they explained like the infrastructure that would go behind it. And I was like, you know what, that's cool. Let me think about it though. Didn't really take that long to think about it. I was like, you know what? I can't do this because the why workshop is such an intimate experience. The real magic happens after they get a chance to get whatever they want to get down on paper, and we can kind of have an exchange. And it's only 5 people, permitted in every workshop, so it keeps it really intimate. And so for this particular subject, I can't say that I would do a video drip kind of thing, maybe for a different topic where it's more educational, but the interaction here is where the real magic happens. And I was able to make that decision and not sacrifice for, scalability or efficiency, because I wasn't going to compromise the client experience.
Yeah, I love Ruthie, this particular conversation, like somebody else is already saying, I'm really enjoying this conversation because it is such an important one. And it is really needed now. Like a lot of people that have kind of come into programs that we now run, like when I've asked them the question, like, why did you join this? Because we actually teach people how to create their own show so they can show up very authentically. That does a lot of, what you're talking about as well. It's like music to my ears. It's like allowing people to show up authentically, using like who you are, who's the radical authentic you, and infusing that in everything you do, but then linking that to your, like, what's the bigger picture here? Like, you want to ascend people, you want to work with them on a more intimate basis. Like, how do you do that? So you create a little show with intention. Now, when some of the students actually joined, some of them were telling us, like, and this hasn't been, it's not just one, it's been several, have been saying, I know that there is a time, I want to be able to do my marketing really authentically. And I want to learn from people who are being really authentic in the same way, like radically authentic, because there are far too many charlatans out there whom say that they can do things and then they're not delivering on it, because, like you put it so nicely, is like the wrapping on the present is so beautiful, but then when I unwrap it, it's like, what the heck is this? This is not in alignment or consistent with what the wrapper said. I'm like opening a Mars bar and I'm getting a crunchy inside. It's like it's not what I asked for. That's not what I thought I was going to get. So this is very much about like making sure that the wrapper on the outside matches the content on the inside, and it's infused through everything that you do.
Sorry, I just saw that in the comments.
Yeah, what are you saying? Whipped cream on garbage. Yeah. I'm just going to pull that. Yeah, it's like, oh, that looks really yummy, and then you go to eat, you take the whipped cream off the top, which was delicious, and then, oh goodness, yeah.
I mean, and since we're kind of calling out a little bit this like scalable evergreen coaching model, I'm like so over it, because what it ends up typically being, having been somebody who's paid 5 figures for coaching programs, there's nothing worse than getting into it and then you realize that it's basically a course with like a Facebook support group. You're like, this is not what you said this was going to be. This is not it. This is not okay. I paid this much money for what I was told was going to be a high touch, high involved, very tailored experience. And that is not what people are getting. And so, like I said, the client experience is being sacrificed in favor of making more money, which is incredibly short-sighted, because what's happening is people like us are getting together and here we're doing it live, because you know what, there's no I'm radically authentic, so I'm walking the walk. There's no shame in my game. I can admit it. They got me. They got me, but we're talking about it. And it's like, okay, we're talking about it live, but people are talking about it privately all over it, and they're realizing that they're not alone. And so it's all very short-lived. I think, like you said, we're seeing a turn in the market, and it's like, okay, well, you know what, you're saying that this is what it is, but I really need to trust you now. I don't think that people are necessarily afraid to spend their money exactly, but it's like, I really need to believe that you're going to give me what you say. But also, like, when I get in there, it better be what you said.
Yeah. And I'm going to go down this path too. I don't want to hold you too much longer, because we could talk for another 2 hours on this topic, because it's so darn important. But one of the things that where was I going to go with that? Is with these programs, right? So when you've got high level, high touch, and that expectation. I mean, I've heard of people doing $100,000 offers. like, and that's all good and well. However, like you say, you better deliver, like bring it. If you're going to say you're going to do that, best you dish me up our 5-course degustation meal that goes with the price tag that's actually going to get me the result that you promised me. So one of the things that I really love about, working in, because this is actually a conscious decision that we've made in a lot of like the programs that we have, and it is about keeping it the intimacy and the high level and the high touch and the making sure, because there's nothing worse, in my opinion, than joining a program and then going, okay, how do I don't quite understand that particular concept. I don't know how to move forward, but I can't get any one-on-one time with anyone. Or if I do want one-on-one time, it's going to cost me extra money. Or I now have to outsource.
Or it's a week from now.
It's a week from now. Or I have to spin my wheels and just try and figure this out myself. Where I just love that we're able to create places where people can go, hey, Trace, can I just have a bit of your time? Just help me move through this particular section, because then you're shifting from being highly leveraged numbers game, just get the numbers in the door. Your metrics move from those front end leads to, now how many students can I actually get through my program? How many of them can I actually get to finish it, implement it, and have a result? And so I think that's actually one of the measurements that we have in our company. Is not, we don't necessarily measure, what's coming in the front door per se. It's like, okay, we know we've got to do that. But more importantly is what students we have and the people that we're working with, are they moving forward? Are they able to implement the things that we are teaching them? And are they getting a result? And are they transforming not only themselves, but their business in the process? Yes. And that's a vastly different model and intention when you're building your business in that manner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love all of that. And I mean, you've got these programs out here, some of the standards in the industry, and they'll have like a 15%, 20%, so-called success rate. And I'm just like, I would die. Like I would die if I had I couldn't do that. I couldn't be like, oh, okay, there's a good chance that 80% of you are going to walk away from here and not get what you thought you were going to. No, that's not okay. That's like going into a restaurant and 80% of your people leave without getting the level of, quality of food that they expect, or even getting the right order. Like a restaurant wouldn't last long if that were the case, but we've got so much is shrouded in secrecy, and we've got, a lot of bro marketing, and, people aren't transparent. They aren't transparent about their results. And if they were, then we might see that these are just arbitrary price tags in a lot of cases that they are just slapping on there to say, hey, yeah, so if you're going to do a 12-week program, then it should definitely be at least this much. It's like, no, what's in that program? You can't just tell people that they should have a 5-figure program just based on the length. How do you know they're any good?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole conversation for another. We totally could go from there. But I want to give you an opportunity. And I mentioned earlier, and I'm trying to think back now too. I said, hold this thought, because I want to come back here. And it was about, so it was like that planning. It's that planning piece. Like the question, thank you. Because the question was, when you're in that phase, how do you know when you've got enough information that you don't need any more? Because you go down the hole, right? Like this, particularly in the marketing world, you open up that and it's like a huge pit. You could go a million different places. How do you know when you got enough?
Yes. So what I would say with that is when you've researched enough to take any type of action. So a lot of times when we're learning something new, we will get the tactics of it before we get the actual strategy types of applications for it. So the example that I'll use is when I hopped on TikTok. So TikTok, I'm a millennial. So, the Gen Z folks are like, this isn't your app, get off. And I'm like, sorry, I'm staying. my bad, but not really. But when I got on there, I was like, okay, I'm looking. I'm looking, because the thing is you already have what you need. You already know what it is that you need. And right now you're searching around to see if you can find it. And what I liked about TikTok was that people were, the segment of TikTok I found myself on, because you can go down a lot of rabbit holes on TikTok. The segment of TikTok I found myself on, people were just showing up being genuinely authentic, trying to make people laugh or trying to provoke thoughts. And so I was like, you know what? I like this. I like this. Let me try it out. So I basically learned enough to kind of play around with it, figure it out. And it's amazing. TikTok was not where my TikToks got the most reaction. And so what would happen at first, I just had them on TikTok and I was like, you know what happens, right? Again, mindset of curiosity, right? You have the high enough, self-appreciation to have that courage. What happens if I take this TikTok and post it on LinkedIn? Ooh. I was like, ooh, that's big. And so I did it. And people on LinkedIn were like, can I license this from you? What is this? This is amazing. This is great. This is hilarious. So my TikToks tend to get pretty big on platforms that aren't even TikTok. But again, it was just finding something that fit for me. If I had done it a few times and it wasn't, okay, we're beyond Ruthie being uncomfortable with it, not knowing how to use it. I know how to use it. I just don't like it. So that's me in Instagram. I just don't like Instagram. And it is that overly polished aesthetic. Like when I saw the woman who had like 7 kids and like her living room was perfect with the photos and stuff, I was like, I got 4 kids and my living room don't look like that. So I can't be here with you. So I don't like Instagram. I know how to use it. I know the strategy for Instagram, but I personally don't like it. So it doesn't feature in my business. But if I had a client who's like, hey, a big thing that we do, brand identity is a part of what we do. So that's very visual. Okay, well, you got to be on Instagram. That's where you should be. Not the only place maybe, but that's where you should be. And so I think that that's the big thing is do your research, do what you can to get hands-on experience though. And again, sometimes it's just approaching it from that tactical standpoint, determining, am I just uncomfortable because I don't know how to use it? If I know how to use it or how to, use it for expression or whatever, am I still uncomfortable? If I'm not still uncomfortable, then it could be a good tool for you to use as part of your expression. When you're looking at anything related to pretty much any other tactic, right? So even being on someone else's show, that doesn't take nearly as much research. That actually takes more connections, but you want to, find out, get some recommendations. Okay, how can I provide the best experience possible? Do you have any tips for me? Okay, and then just do it. You might feel nervous maybe because it's your first time if you've never done it before, but once you do it a few times, then you can assess, was I just nervous because I was doing it for the first time, or am I nervous every time and this causes me severe levels of anxiety? Like, you gotta figure those things out. So really it's just learn enough, take some action, and use that as feedback to course correct. Because what you don't want to do is spend months and months and months trying to learn about something, having first, potentially having the opportunity pass you by. But also, what if you spend months and months and months learning in the wrong direction?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like you can consistently travel in the wrong direction. If you leave my house and go left, you will hit a dead end. It doesn't matter whether you're in a Ferrari or you're walking, you will hit a dead end. That's the wrong way. If you go right, you can go out into the world, go to the gas station, grocery store, whatever. Again, whether you're walking or you're in the Ferrari, you will get somewhere. So it's really important to make sure that you give yourself those opportunities to course correct and you don't spend hours and days and weeks studying the wrong stuff.
Absolutely. Well said. Thank you. And yeah, just learn enough, take the action. And that's the same with anything, even, inside of our programs. That's exactly the way we teach. Like, I'm going to teach you this little bit, go away, implement that. And then incrementally, you are going to be able to move forward. You do it over and over and over again. You get better and better and better at it. And, happy days. Anyhow, I want to say thank you so much, Ruthie. Before we go, though, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of, is there anything else that you think is really important for us to share with our audience today? And then secondly, I know these guys are going to want to get more of Ruthie Bowles. Where can they go?
Okay, so first thing, what I could offer you, if you are wondering whether or not anybody wants to hear what you have to say, I promise they do. They absolutely want to hear what you have to say, but what they don't want to hear you say what Google is going to say. So whatever your content is, it should not be a regurgitation of something they can find on Google. So if you're sharing a perspective that you read in an article, I want to know your take on the article. I don't want to know the article. I can read, right? I want to know your take on it. So don't just share the article. Tell me what you got out of the article. If you are thinking, oh, I've never gone live before, I challenge you to do something you've never done in your content, even if it's only a little bit. So I'm not saying you have to go live, but if you've never even posted a video, try recording a video and sending it to like 2 business buddies. Ask them for feedback. See, I'm not even asking you to make it public. Send it to 2 business buddies. Break that ice, break through some of that, discomfort around it, because where you feel the discomfort is where you have the most potential for growth. And if you are looking to connect with me, you can find me on pretty much any platform. But if you Google my name, Ruthie Bowles, you will find my website, my social media channels, interviews that I've done. You just Google my name and you will be able to find me. I mentioned TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm on Clubhouse. Love Clubhouse. It's live, right? So it's hard to be it's not hard for some people to be inauthentic on Clubhouse, but I have a really good time on there and I'm very careful about my experience. But you can find me pretty much anywhere, but a Google of my name, Ruthie Bowles, and you will find plenty on me.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for being here today. And I want to thank everybody who's watching today. Guys, if you just caught like the end of this conversation, I would actually encourage you to go back and start listening from the beginning, because there's some really, really good stuff that Ruthie has spoken about today in today's show. And I want to make sure that you guys get an opportunity to kind of hear it all. There will be the replay. You'll see it on Facebook. Also, you can go to our YouTube channel Metadime Digital Co. You'll find it on there, which has got a whole bunch of different shows on the Metadime channel. So just go and check that out as well. And if you like what we're talking about, you must hit the subscribe button and make sure that you guys can get notified every time we go live on Instagram, on YouTube. We're also on Instagram too. So we're everywhere, guys. So anywhere you want to find us, we're a little bit like Ruthie. You can find us all over the place. So just search Tracy M. Wilson and you'll be able to find a whole lot of things that we and the team at Metadime are doing. So that being said, I want to let you guys know that I'll be back again this Friday with another episode of Unlocked, and again next Wednesday with another episode, but with a guest. So 10 a.m. Brisbane time is the time that you want to tune in for a live Unlocked show. And for those of you who've been listening for quite some time, you'll know that I always end the show with, you must go and live your life unlocked, because there is just no other way. So go do that, be the amazing person that you are, use your radical authenticity, and just enjoy life and start creating and leaving that legacy that you were born to do. So that being said, I'm going to say bye for now. Thanks so much, Ruthie. It's been a fantastic conversation with you, and I look forward to actually having you back on the show at some other time. Thanks, everybody. Have a fantastic week, and bye for now.